Hey everyone, this is Rambo with the Blacktail Deer Foundation podcast, and today I have some wonderful colleagues and esteemed guests with me, and we are going to be talking about the Blacktail Deer Foundation first year in review. So before we get kicked off, go ahead and introduce Marshall Johnson here on my right. Marshall, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Marshall Johnson. I'm the Regional Director for Alaska. I'm also the Regional Development Director for the Blacktail Deer Foundation and the Mule Deer Foundation. Been working up there in the Alaska area for about 3 years now, and we've developed quite the chapters we'll talk about later.
All right, looking forward to hear it. And then on my left here is Ryan Krapp, another colleague at MDF and Blacktail Deer Foundation. Ryan, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, nice to have you join you today. Ryan Krapp, and I live in the Olympia, Washington area, and I'm the Regional Conservation Coordinator for Mule Deer Foundation, Blacktail Deer Foundation, and so, yeah, help set up habitat restoration projects and help guide the research and monitoring efforts that support the states and stuff too. So for our blacktail deer, which we don't know nearly enough about.
Thank you, Ryan, for joining us. And then on the far left is our only Alaska resident on staff, Jim Baichtal. Jim, welcome.
Yeah, my name's Jim Baichtal. I live in Thorn Bay, Alaska on Prince of Wales Island, and I'm excited to see the Blacktail Deer Foundation get established in Alaska and what we might accomplish through the teams of what Marshall's been able to achieve with chapters and our partners up there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And, you know, when most people think about deer conservation in the West or Mule Deer Foundation, it is typically mule deer. But there are these elusive critters called the Blacktail Deer Foundation. Well, no, we are the Blacktail Deer Foundation, but to serve blacktail deer. And let's talk a little bit about why this got started. We're about a year in. Let's say it started December of 2024. What was the catalyst for starting Blacktail Deer Foundation?
Well, I'm going to say right now, Jim.
Okay.
Jim was the catalyst on this.
I was kind of a thorn in the mule deer side for many, many years, just trying to get something started. I think it might have been 2009 we first tried to get things going in Southeast Alaska. Mm-hmm. And there was another effort in 2012. And, you know, the bottom line was when we would show up in the communities and talk to the locals that they had a lot of passion about the deer that's in their backyard, but they wanted to know why was the Mule Deer Foundation there, even though it was in the mission statement of the Mule Deer Foundation to conserve blacktail and their habitat. So in the creation of this foundation, it has made that to have something focused on blacktail deer. It's just made that delivery and what we can achieve so much easier.
And what gaps does it fill as far as specifically to Alaska? And then I'd love to get to you as far as the Pacific Northwest. But what gaps does it fill specifically for blacktail deer as far as habitat concerns and things of that nature?
There's no other entity that can focus on that. At least from the Alaska perspective. There are some other things that Ryan can touch on in Oregon, Washington, Northern California. But in Alaska, this is it. There is no other entity that can focus on the habitat and the populations and the research and those kind of things that the Blacktail Deer Foundation can do.
Right. Yeah. And for those viewers and listeners, to make a quick distinction for those that don't know, in Alaska, it's Sitka blacktail deer, and then in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California, British Columbia, when we talk about blacktail deer, it's Columbia blacktail deer. So going back to you, Ryan, and the question of what gaps it fills, the Blacktail Deer Foundation specifically for blacktail deer in your area, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, entirely. As you alluded to, it's the Columbian blacktail deer range from middle of BC on down to the southern Oregon, kind of before it starts to hybridize down there with the mule deer and into California. But even the states, the managers of the wildlife, right? The states are charged with that, and so the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and ODF&W in Oregon as well for the last 10 years. And so there's been a little bit more refined effort in trying to understand their population dynamics. For one, these critters are elusive. They live in the coastal rainforests that we have out there on the West Coast, and so it's even understanding more population dynamic stuff and that's where I think a niche that the Blacktail Deer Foundation is helping to fill, support the states in trying to do some of these other additional research efforts in population scat surveys and fecal DNA and trail now the advent of some trail camera type grid arrays and things like that. So a little bit more hands-off thing. All that stuff is very expensive.
Right.
And so us supporting that is a key just for raising awareness of it. One, having supporting the states and doing this type of stuff, science-based management and stuff. And so Jim can attest to it as well, as that it's an art and a science, but you need the science backing of it all to make sure that it's relevant and we're not spinning our wheels and just doing something that's not relevant, right? And not helping the population itself or the management of the lands around it to have healthy ecosystems for deer, fish, birds, everything, right? The work we're doing and trying to do is going to benefit the whole ecosystem.
So really this first year has been about let's find out as much information as we possibly can because we don't know so much leading up to this point. Is it the same for Sitka and Alaska, or is there a little bit more of a knowledge base there just based on the heritage that has existed for a while?
It's a tremendous subsistence item up there. The number of deer that people consume, it's the primary source of protein in people's freezers and stuff, so it plays a big role. Partnering with Alaska Department of Fish and Game and trying to help their deer biologists and their researchers on the ground, like Ryan alluded to, you can't get an easy population estimate. You can't do aerial counts. I mean, the vegetation is just so thick. And so now they've came up with a combination of fecal DNA and trail cameras, and they're trying to use that in multiple places. They just finished a big study on Mitkoff Island, and those results are going to be coming out here in the next, I think the next year. And they do move on the landscape, but it's more of a very short vertical movement up and down instead of large migrations to a wintering area. And so they're much more dispersed across the landscape. Our predators are totally different in southeast Alaska. The northern part of the panhandle is primarily brown bears on the islands, where the southern part is both no brown bears and just black bears and wolves. And so the complexity of the predators and how that interacts. So there's a lot of difference across the landscape. The amount of snow. The northern Tongass gets way more snow than the southern Tongass. And what does that do to the populations? And just trying to find out where we can have a difference and where we can make a difference with our chapters on that ground. Timber management has played a big role in the transformation of landscapes there, and the older second growth coming in that once was great habitat that's not now gives us incredible opportunity to make a difference on that landscape, putting deer back in those places. We're not near as complex as where Ryan works in Washington, Oregon with who owns the land, predominantly owned by the Forest Service, with a large amount of native lands and private lands kind of blocked together with state lands. And so, but it's not a checkerboard. It doesn't change like it does in Washington and Oregon with that pattern of land ownership and the complications that come with that. It's not an easy thing. You just can't go out and say, there's 100,000 deer on this landscape. It's just an impossibility to come up with an exact amount of what are we looking at for a population? How were they affected by last year's winter?
One thing, so, I heard both of you speak about aerial technology and taking fecal samples, but I didn't hear collaring, which has been a prominent discussion in the Mule Deer Foundation episodes that we've had. Is collaring difficult because of those conditions that you were speaking of? Why is it not an option at the same way it would be for mule deer?
Yeah, I can take that a little bit. Where their collaring efforts are happening actually in Washington right now, and just launched and helped support a collaring study. But it's the combination of all of that. It's the collars, it's radio transmitters to sensors that are also attached to those cameras, so they can get proximity detections and such. So trail cameras only has a field of view, we all know. But that deer might walk right behind that tree, 5 feet from that tree. So you attach a sensor to it, so the collar attached to the sensor. All this effort is to try to get a modeling estimate, right? So like you have a 5% chance of detectability in this grid array in Southern Oregon, but that might be different in northern Washington.
Right.
There might be a 15% chance of detectability. And so you got to work those into the population models that are way above me, certainly. But our managers, our wildlife managers, the new technology is to be able to better estimate our deer herds and if they're trending up or down, buck to doe ratios and stuff that all matter for understanding the population dynamics and so collars are used, I know in Alaska too, but it's a lot more
Right.
difficult situation to do because of the vegetation. You're absolutely right. Than it is mule deer out in sagebrush country where they can go
And just getting them.
drop a net on from a
Right,
helicopter, right?
right. Marcia, I'd love to hear from a chapter's perspective and just the people that you work with on what are they celebrating in this first year? What are the highlights that you're hearing as far as feedback goes from the people that you're working with in chapters?
I think the number one thing is the attention
Mm-hmm.
to blacktail. They've always been considered kind of a ignored species.
Mm.
And that's the biggest impression I get from Alaskans is finally someone is focusing on the blacktail.
Right.
They all realize that, most of the information is all anecdotal. And you get a lot of information from these folks because some of these folks have hunted in the same area their whole life.
Or generations.
And so we can take a lot of what they say as it's pretty good information.
Yeah.
And then you throw the science on top of that, which is starting to happen.
Right.
But that's probably the biggest thing is just it's almost like a relief
Mm-hmm.
and thankfulness that, finally we're doing something, looking into it.
And we've always had chapters in blacktail country through the Mule Deer Foundation, but as Jim has alluded to, is that it's tough to start a conversation when you're talking about, you're talking about
When you're branded out in Mule Deer Foundation.
Exactly. It's just like we don't.
Yeah, that was
We
a lot
like
of
to
fun.
hunt mule deer if we go to, the eastern part of the western United States. But I've noticed that too as a volunteer myself before joining on the staff as a scientist, biologist as well. The chapters and stuff that were blacktail deer chapters in the blacktail deer range, they're 1,000% in on being like, yes, I'd love to see more awareness brought to the deer that I hunt every day after work.
Right.
I go out or like you say, a subsistence reason, like that's what it is. And so, we all love the icon of the West, the vanishing icon of the West, and the mule deer certainly. But we know that to understand the blacktail deer population is it's one of those species that it's under science-based knowledge on population dynamics, predators, weather, timber stands, or harvest management strategies over the years and such. And there's at least 10 variables that you have to come in to consider on any population, any wildlife population. It's never just one thing. It's not just timber. It's not just the snow that year. It's a combination of all of those. And so teasing some of those out where we can figure out that we can maybe make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Timber management is one of those things where you make a difference. Can't do anything about the weather, right? We sure like to. Jim was just telling me how he got 8 feet of snow early on, and then it rained and melted down to nothing, which a blessing in disguise maybe, but it's going to be...
We're not through the winter yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so all those dynamics, but helping understand that population and how it responds is maybe where we're trying to help out.
Just out of curiosity, because we've been talking about predation on the mule deer side so much the last day or two, does it pose the same threat to blacktail deer? And if so, what do those predators look like? Is it obviously it's not going to be mountain lions on a coastal range, but what is it the same? Is it have the same effect or influence? And maybe we don't know. Maybe that's part of what we're trying to gather as far as data and information now. But just curious if there's anything to explore there further.
I think there's as I just alluded to, there's 10 variables out there that control population dynamics all the time. Obviously, predation is one of those, certainly. And especially for, I think, in the spring during fall and drop and stuff like that. All those predators are on the landscape. There's brown, there's black, bear, bobcats, cougars. There's plenty of cougar in rainforest country.
Okay.
There is, certainly. Mountain lion is a big one as well. And so, all the states that we live in and stuff, there's open season on all of those predators, except for California. I digress.
Shocker.
Right. But there's the spring bear hunts and stuff. They're always under threat
Right.
for restriction and stuff. But it's tough to be able to. It's a management tool.
Right.
Predation is as well, right? We're predators of it.
Yeah.
We're part of that equation, and we could control our harvest numbers. That's what levels are set or whatever like that. But predator populations ebb and flow as well with conditions and food availability.
Right.
If we don't have deer in the landscape, those predators don't have food either, right? So there's
absolutely
has to be a balance.
It's all a balance.
I know with Jim, Prince of Wales, they did a study on the black bear,
Right.
and
Right.
I found that extremely interesting. And I have small knowledge and minimal knowledge and stuff with regards to the predation issues in Alaska. I know some, but the Prince of Wales one stands above all the other stuff. And I don't know if Jim, if you want to talk a little bit about that. I think it was
Yeah,
very
I was
intriguing.
actually involved in all three of those studies, and it was 48% of the fawns are taken by black bears where black bears are in the first 2 weeks of their lives.
Right. Vulnerable.
So right
the
off
most
the
vulnerable.
get-go, 50% of the deer are gone.
Wow.
And that has been very constant over 20 years of the three different times that we had focused research with that. And the last one had a lot of fawns collared. Wolves definitely have everything. We're unique in that the coastal range, other than a little bit once in a while showing up along the mainland, we don't have the coyotes and the bobcats and lynx and those kind of things. There's a little bit of lynx up on the northern end. There's a little bit of wolverine along the mainland. There's been a few mountain lions come down the Stikine River, but it's basically the southern islands have got black bears and wolves, and the northern islands have brown bears, and they each interact differently on that landscape. And you're right, if the habitat is healthy and the deer population is healthy, then the effects of predators on that herd are much less than they are when anything there is muted somehow.
Right. There's exactly to his point. If there's enough food on the landscape for them all, there's
Right.
like any wildlife population. There's reasons that they all drop their fawns all at once, or all the chicks hatch at once, right? You see all the Nat Geo documentary type stuff. Is that it's a numbers game, right? So a certain percent of all offspring are going to perish no matter what. But if in one year it's 80%, and in one year it's 20%, you're going to have population dynamics that are different, right? So.
It's interesting. I remember on social media, and granted, there's a lot that happens there that, whatever the case may be, it's anecdotal, it's
Yeah,
opinionated.
we shake our heads all the time.
Yeah.
We do.
But
As scientists, biologists.
When the Alaska Fish and Game was doing some of the black bear management culling project, I think it was maybe even out of helicopters, people were getting so upset in the comments, and it's like, oh, well, I wonder if they knew that they were taking out 48 to 50% of fawns, because that changes. I would imagine that would change somebody's opinion on how horrible of an act that is, because that's a big disruption. I mean, 48 to 50% of fawns is a big disruption to not only deer, but just the umbrella effect that they have, on other species. So
Yeah.
I remember when that was posted. I was at that meeting back in 2023, I think it was, fall of 23. We posted that information. I mean, I was shocked. And I posted that, and the responses, people are like, are you kidding me? And a lot of these people, one of the charts that we saw was the percent of black bear hunters had dropped over the past 10 years. Like that, black bear population increased almost like the same distance.
Yep.
And people respond like, I'm getting my spring black bear license this year. They were shocked. And again, what it is, it's information, it's education.
Right.
When people know about stuff, they will respond.
yeah, no, absolutely.
And again, it's one of the it's one piece of the pie, right? And so a 50% culling or dropping or predation rate or whatever seems high, right? But if you have the habitat to support a healthy deer population, as you know, that 50% of 100 is 50, right? But if you have 50% of 250, that's the difference. And it's all about the carrying capacity on the
Absolutely.
landscape, along with the predation, along with the weather, along with Jim out there shooting them all. I mean, no, but all those things, right? And so it's a multitude of factors. Predation's one of them. And one of the areas that we as lovers of hunting and deer and all and bear and everything else is that's one thing that we can all, you can go out there and harvest a bear as well.
Right.
That's all part of the equation. So
Yeah. Well, and I think also similar to Mule Deer Foundation, the Blacktail Deer Foundation is no different in that we are habitat focused first, and with that, when the habitat is healthy, like you've said,
carrying capacity.
Carrying capacity is healthy, and then that is getting closer to restoring that balance. And so, I think we want to observe and acknowledge that predation is obviously a thing and part of all of the nuances that go into deer population numbers in general. But at the end of the day, we hang our hat on the conservation piece of it and being able to improve those habitats in various ways. So, going back to our first year, were there any kind of major snags or challenges that were, whether it's a rocky story and we got through it, or it's something we're still working on as far as just building community and support? It sounds like specifically because people were so willing and ready for a Blacktail Deer Foundation or a Blacktail specific focus that it wasn't the case. But any challenges that we found just in that first year of trying to build this foundation?
No, on my end of it, I started going up there in 24, and we were the Mule Deer Foundation, and nobody would talk to me. I was not relevant, and they would ask, "Why are you even here?"
Right.
If they would talk to me,
Right.
it was extremely hard. I was lucky that we had Jim, who's been championing blacktail deer, to help me get into some communities, one of which was Kodiak through Ben Condro and his crew up there, Carl. They latched on because they knew what we wanted to do. They already knew what Jim was trying to achieve. And so they jumped on and I appreciate Kodiak so much. Then with Jim's support down in the South, getting that stuff. So basically that, before we became the Blacktail Deer Foundation, those are my 2 chapters.
Right.
That was it.
Wow.
I was able to convince our interim CEO, Kelly Hepler at the time, to be able to at least go team Blacktail. And so we had one set of hats made. Anybody who's got one of those hats, it's probably even worth millions of dollars soon because it's a one-off. Anyway,
Special edition, exclusive.
I put that on, so that was the fall of 24.
24.
Fall of 24, and I went back up there and attended an Alaskan sportsman banquet. I had people coming up and going, "Who are you? What's Blacktail? I mean, talk to me." It's because I was relevant now.
You just talked to
I'm
him.
Blacktail.
You talked to him 3
Right.
months ago, but now you're wearing a
exactly,
blacktail hat.
exactly. They wouldn't even look at me, or they'd make a snide comment. But I had the blacktail stuff on, and that changed things because I became relevant.
Right.
When we switched over December 4th and announced that we were building the Blacktail Deer Foundation, it was awesome.
Yeah.
So we were up in Kodiak doing an informational meeting at the Double Shovel Cider House. We had,
Shout out to Double Shovel, great supporter.
awesome. And we had the Alaska Department of Fish and Game there and talking about what we were helping support with regards to a study up there. After that was done and that announcement and everything, I had phone calls coming in.
Wow.
And I started 5 chapters in January right after that. I mean, just boom, boom. And I mean, Juneau was always the hardest nut to crack. Very, very political. They want you to be a politician. They want you, and we don't get into that. You know,
Right.
we're about the habitat. They came through. And I don't know if you want to add anything to this, Jim.
What are we at now? We
So-
got
8.
12.
12, yeah.
8 chapters, but I'm looking at starting, it looks like I'm a chapter started in Fairbanks at the end of the month. I have Petersburg, I have interest there. I have interest in Homer and in Soldotna. And then yesterday, a gentleman came over from Cordova
Wow.
and asked me if we would be interested too. So I think it's, we're only 1 year in.
Right.
And I would say probably by the end of the spring, I bet you we'll be from 8, we'll probably be up to at least 10 to 11.
Wow.
And I think we're right up front that we have great opportunities on the Tongass National Forest, the main panhandle of Alaska for habitat stuff. But as you go to some of these other places, they're not having a habitat issue. But there's a lot of research opportunities that we could partner with Alaska Department of Fish and Game and help support them through our members, like going out and doing mortality surveys, trail camera checks and stuff like that, and working directly with ADF&G on the ground to help them in their mission and what because they don't have good population estimates in a lot of cases either, and they're just now working towards those things. We don't focus, we totally recognize the role that predators play in a population, but we don't get into predator management.
Right.
We recognize that that is a big part of it. And part of what may come out of research will quantify just how much that is in the mortality of the herd, but we don't focus on that.
Yeah.
And to that thing, it's predation can be additive or compensatory, and so you may not be able to move the needle and affect that predation rate.
We're a little
to
more
an extent.
fortunate because we've got those big mountains over there
Yeah,
along
right.
the border there
Yeah,
that
that's
keeps
true.
a lot of that stuff away.
Yeah.
And so our predator species are not near as diverse as what you're facing in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California.
I have just another Rambo curious question. Are your trail cameras, because you love yourself a trail cam, I follow you on Instagram, are those research? Are those your own curiosity? Is it just your love of blacktails at all three, or
Yes.
all three?
Yeah, all
Yes.
three.
So it started out with Sophie Gilbert was at the University of Idaho, and we wanted to look at vertical movement.
Okay, yeah.
And so the Forest Service had gone into a valley, and had harvested and then pre-commercially thinned these units. So the slash in these units was 10 to 12 feet deep. Nothing goes through that.
Right.
So
Not
that
even you.
forced the deer into the corridors, which are where these huge stream systems come down off of the peaks. And so the concept was, as it greened up in the spring, the deer followed the green up the hill. A certain percentage of them stayed low and a certain percentage went high. So we started monitoring that, and we had a control block, and we had 4 of those corridors. What we soon found out was the daily vertical movement of the deer that the deer were feeding. It didn't matter what the elevation of the valley floor was, that they were going up 500 to 800 feet above and bedding every day and coming back down to feed in the lowland, which we had no idea that the daily vertical movement of does and fawns were that. There was a whole component of deer that moved up as it greened up to the subalpine.
Right.
But then also what was happening during the rut and the amount of movement vertically, usually just 5 minutes after sunset and 5 minutes before sunrise, almost all being nocturnal except for right during the heat of the rut. And so then Sophie changed jobs. The Forest Service had done some pre-commercial thinning, but left corridors, and they wanted to see if I could monitor those corridors within the thinned units to whether the deer was using that. And kind of that, different managers and stuff kind of changed. And then so what I've got on the ground now, I monitor. I've got 28 cameras out there, and I keep those things alive.
Yeah.
It helps me to understand and take as we're looking at habitat and the seasonality use of that habitat. This gives me some place to anchor. Like, well, we know that they're using this much of that landscape, and
Right.
so we need to be able to have this piece of habitat connected to this piece of habitat because daily it's being used. And if we've managed lands in between here as an agency or private landowners, maybe we can go into that middle ground and make a difference in that deer's movement ability.
Right.
So
And I wonder if that speaks to, this is just me kind of taking a guess at it, but I wonder if that speaks to kind of the elusive nature of them when you learned, like, no wonder why we're not seeing them that much, because they're doing something completely different that we thought was maybe a seasonal thing that's now we're learning is a daily thing.
if I take my adult bucks and I plot those up, which I'm weird and anal and got enormous spreadsheets. If I take those and do that, it's really kind of a sad thing because there's about 3 days a year, if you want to get a mature Sitka blacktail buck where I have my cameras, that you ought to go to the woods. And all the rest of the time we hunt, you're just kind of spinning your wheels.
Wow.
It's kind of disheartening to go like, well, I should have only been out there on these days.
Right. As you alluded to, very nocturnal, very, very elusive. The environments in which these deer live. I know this fall I walked probably past 10 deer that were as close as that table away, and I certainly knew I was there. But I couldn't, you just
Right.
don't know.
I think it's even more complicated where you live in the fact that you've got roads and railways and private property and fences and stuff like the deer that I've got just has the landscape. It's not. It doesn't have all those complications and things that they have to navigate through.
And in small spaces, though,
Yep.
too. Like you said, it could be a couple 100 feet vertical daily or something like that, but nearly all season long. There's some deer collared again in Washington they got, and I haven't looked into much of the data in Oregon, but they're going through a lot of data here right now, collar, fecal DNA, and such. That stuff that we as the Blacktail Deer Foundation hope to be able to, with them, publish and get that research out there, so we can all have a larger knowledge base of what's of the population dynamics that have been researched over the last 10 years, to that point of the dynamics, like home ranges of these deer, got collared does in Washington. Their home range is literally like a quarter of a square mile, literally, and that's all seasonal use. That right there, and so they got cover, they got water, and they got some forage. So you can imagine if you have a big blanket of green with a big blanket of brown underneath of it, closed canopy forest and such. If you don't have those three habitat components within very small spaces, there's a likely chance that there's not going to be deer in there. They don't have the heterogeneity in the landscape in which they need. They can live in those small spaces, and I'm sure many blacktail hunters, successful blacktail hunters, can attest to, is that you pattern one or two deer, they're not going to go anywhere. They are right there. Besides during the rut, where they're going to rip around and maybe show themselves a little more. But the blacktail are fairly homely, aren't they?
I found that the big mature bucks are that. Those bucks that believe they should be the breeders that aren't will actually range about 3 or 4 miles.
No kidding.
And I've got them over cameras when I used to run cameras back and forth. And it's amazing. They had this circuit that was an immense area because they just weren't that dominant buck.
Sure.
Is that beyond the rut? Or, is that all the time? 20, all year
just
long?
during the rut. Just
Okay.
during the
Yeah.
rut.
Sure.
Especially that chasing phase before the
Yeah.
first doe comes into estrus. Yeah.
And that's for bucks, right? But probably does and fawns, they probably don't need to go anywhere.
I believe the smallest home range that Sophie came up with during her research was 40 acres.
And that's so interesting for someone that's not a biologist but is trying to absorb as much of this information. When you look at the study that just came out of University of Wyoming about how it's for mule deer, the ones that migrate, that have those long 100-mile migration patterns, their survivability is almost double than those that are just within kind of their native environments, where it's the opposite. Where it's for blacktail deer, where sticking to that smaller area is what's going to
What could
help survivability.
if all the habitat components are there, if they have if they have all the seasonal requirements and to be and live in that space,
There's no need to go anywhere else.
Right. But if we don't have those, if we have vast expanses of forest stands that are all growing up, they're all 20 years old or stem exclusion type stuff, and we don't have that forage based on the landscape, it's in my full belief, it's hard to find because we can't find those deer out there if they are out there, right? We can't, but it's not inconceivable to think that there's probably just not deer out there. They don't have all the required components to live, and so
They move through those areas. They're going from food source to food source or bedding habitat, moving through them on major trails. And there's nothing to hold them in there.
Right.
And that's where me as on the conservation, the habitat side of things, and we try to set up restoration projects or timber thinning projects and things like that are going to be beneficial on a landscape level. But like I said, it even boils down to being able to support a local herd or a few local deer by having a small project where you're removing conifers back away from a wetland complex and stuff, so you get your huckleberries and your other small willows and stuff growing up there that deer forage on. They like the forbs. Deer aren't herbivores in the sense where they'll eat grass or a lot of grass and stuff, but you need that rough component out there. But conifer encroachment's a big deal in our high mountain meadows and in Washington, Oregon, and so we're working on doing a lot of supporting those kind of projects. So our local chapters and stuff, there's going to be an enormous boom of blacktail chapters coming up and down Washington and Oregon coast now too. We've always had a few, but the interest is huge now. But those local chapters and those local supporters and the volunteers, they want to get out there and do some boots on the ground, get their hands dirty type stuff too. So these habitat restoration projects are perfect for supporting deer in very small locales, really, honestly. And so, but we do that on a broad based brush too, like units all kind of scattered all over. But yeah, so we're very much supportive and trying to set up those habitat restoration type things to create that heterogeneity on the landscape.
Absolutely.
Big blankets of green or brown are not useful.
Well, I know on the social media side, I keep hitting up Cameron Haynes to help get the Blacktail Deer Foundation name out there, being that he's a blacktail, grew up in blacktail country and is a hunter of blacktail deer. So if you're listening or somehow managed to find this Cam Haynes, please check your DMs. You have several messages from the Blacktail Deer Foundation.
And there's a lot of people out there that are there's a ton of people that live and breathe blacktail country. They're maybe not as outspoken or it's not as picturesque as the icon of the West there on the front thing, because they're tough. They're tough to hunt.
Yeah.
We've all tried. Jim's successful. I haven't been.
Well, he has 28 trail cams set up, so he's learning those patterns.
You put in your time. You know. I'm
going to tell you what. That's more humbling than it is helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to go to a segment. This is our listener mailbag segment. So we're going to go to Instagram, Facebook, and get a question from one of our followers. Perhaps they're a member, and answer their question. And if you do have a question for us or for our panel for our next podcast, you could send those to askmuledeer.org. We should get a blacktaildeer.org, one of those going for this particular episode. And we'll send you a sticker. So this question is from Zach out of Oregon. He says, I'm frequently hunting the Cascades where blacktail deer and mule deer seem to overlap. What is the best way for me to tell if I'm looking at a mule deer or a blacktail deer in my scope? And is there a difference in how these deer should be managed? Great question, Zach. And this is Oregon, so we're going to let you take this one first.
Well, actually, I'm going to even defer to Jim. Jim's. You grew up in hunting the Cascades ranges, right, as well, and so you too have experienced the hybridization zone and stuff like that. So I'll let you speak to it even.
Yeah, I haven't done that in Southern Oregon, but I definitely did that in Southern Washington. And I think probably the first thing to look at is the tail. There's a definite shading difference, but the tail of a mule deer and the tail of a blacktail are completely different. The mule deer being much more ropey than the tail of a blacktail. We used to target them. We used to target the hybrids because they were large body size. We weren't hunting for antlers. And we used to go up into the Cascades and focus on those areas where they overlap. And I took a lot of bucks when I was a kid that field dressed in the 220 range. They were huge bodied deer. And so I think the first thing is it's a basic coloration of the face and stuff, but the tail is the giveaway. And that might just be that it's slightly more blacktail-esque than mule deer-esque in the hybridization. But that'd be the first thing I would look at.
I would also look at the rump of a mule deer's white.
Yeah, and the blacktail's not.
Blacktail's not, it's brown.
What about the patches here? Like this guy behind us, if you look at these two behind us, that's clearly blacktail. He has his two white patches on the neck there. But this guy, would you maybe consider this a hybrid? Because it has almost that second patch going? Or how much do those white patches play a role in identification?
They come and go.
Yeah.
I mean, I've taken Columbia blacktail with very distinct double white throat patches, and other ones with just a singular one. So I don't know if
there's other variables that are a little bit more.
Yeah, there was other variables that would cross that boundary.
Okay.
No, and I know we put a blog post out there, an article out there on our BDF webpage and so go there, check it out there. It kind of
good
lays
job.
that out there a little bit more. We kind of tried to disseminate a little bit of the hybridization zone and such down along the coast, west coast here as well. So I encourage you to go check that out. And there's The
You
only
can
way
check
to
out. You
truly
can
know.
check out Boone and Crockett's webpage and where it's recognized. You know that I-5 is some of it, but as you get from Medford down, it's actually a meridian line that goes down that they divide that on, and this was actually defined by genetics. Or there was a study. I think Jim Heffelfinger and Emily Latch was involved in that for Boone and Crockett, and where should that line be?
Right.
Where you're getting less than. So getting no more than 10% of mule deer into the blacktail genetics. And that's what that line was divided
Okay.
on.
Interesting.
Yep. And so yeah, anything over 10% of mule deer genetics within a blacktail, because as most listeners know probably is that those hybrids then get a larger rack, right? And so that's because they have more mule deer genetics in them than blacktail, than the overriding blacktail, smaller racks that the blacktail is just a sport. And so once it's 10% officially, like the Boone and Crockett, it's like, we can't consider
But
that a blacktail.
as far as a meat hunter and stuff, that's like I said, is when I grew up, we sought them out because they had a much larger body.
Yep.
Yep, most certainly.
So what is the anything you're looking forward to specifically? I know we have tomorrow, we have a Blacktail Deer Foundation event where we're going to talk about a little bit about projects, but is there any sneak peeks, anything you can mention here that you're excited as far as moving forward, what we're going to be doing at the Blacktail Deer Foundation?
On the Tongass, we have just, and it'll be released tomorrow, I believe, at that thing, that we have come up with by taking a look at all of the young growth across the Tongass, like 790,000 acres of managed stands. If we look at that as a canvas that we can work on, where should we focus? I mean, not all of those places should be managed for habitat. There's the best bang for a buck, I guess.
See what you did there.
So we've came up with a heat map, basically, of where the effort should be focused. Not looking at just federal lands, looking at private lands, native lands, and state lands adjacent to national forest lands and stuff like that. And I'm super excited about that because that can be something that both federal and private entities can look for cross land ownership boundaries and stuff to better those deer and improve subsistence opportunities on the landscape. And one of the aspects of that is not only increasing the habitat, but increasing the availability of those deer through leaving some roads open and things like that. And so if you're going to create the opportunity for deer to be in the landscape, can people actually access them for hunting?
Yeah. And that's one of the beautiful things about the Blacktail Deer Foundation and working in conservation groups is being able to be a voice that talks to all of those entities and brings them all together and work within all three, because sometimes they cannot. More times than not, they cannot necessarily work with each other because of their own bureaucratic situations and stipulations. But
Deer don't care.
yeah,
No.
at
Well,
the end
there
of the
was,
day, right?
The one that always intrigued me and caught some attention was Meyer Creek. So up at Chichikov Island, Jim and I were up in Sitka doing an informational meeting and providing information where we're looking at projects. And there was a gentleman there who's from the Forest Service, I think.
Cody Mosley.
Yeah, Cody Mosley. He approached us and said, "Hey, you guys are doing that timber project close to Meyer Creek." He goes, "That creek got blown out twice, from flash floods. And the salmon are struggling to try to get up it."
Right.
And he goes, "Can we work with you, take the harvested timber and rebuild those banks and reinforce them?" And we did that. And I tell you what, that really opened my eyes, opened the eyes. I think it opened the eyes of people in Juneau too, was that not only what we are doing benefits the blacktail deer, but here we had the opportunity to help fisheries.
Right.
And so we can work together. There's ways to do it. And we look for that stuff.
Is it safe to say by helping fisheries, we are indirectly helping blacktail deer because it's giving bears more food as far as fish
Well, that's
go?
what we always say about Kodiak. They go, "Oh, I bet you those bears just take a lot of the deer out." And I'm like, I don't. They do their share, but salmon are a lot easier.
Yeah, right.
I mean, bears are opportunists.
Right. Yeah.
So if they see a dead deer
Or
they see
hear
an
a fawn
injured deer
calling
or
for its
something,
mom, or,
but they are more interested in the salmon. That's why you see these pictures of people in Alaska walking right by and fishing right next to the big Alaskan browns, because they're more interested in their food right there.
And to that fact of it's about ecological restoration, or right, you got to have a whole environment things out of balance, you're going to have unbalance, right? And so all across the West, Mule Deer Foundation and Blacktail Deer efforts that we're having here, active management and stuff, is trying to reset, rebalance an offset that's out there. And so all things benefit by the work we try to do. And so bringing in, it's an easy sell to bring in other people, other support, other funding sources and such to go do these things, because it's an ecological effect. It's a restoration effort. So
We really
that benefit salmon in the West, obviously, where they
And
where
there's
they are.
a lot of community benefits to this in the people that are doing the work, like in Northern California, when they're doing the mastication, when they're taking logs out of that goes to the mills for biomass, the people that will be doing the work on the Tongass when we're doing that. You've got to have people that are equipment operators, the truck drivers, the people who know how to operate the chainsaws and all of that. I mean, that goes in directly to that local economy. And so these restoration efforts and stuff out there will produce some round log woods for industry, but it also produces all those jobs to support that.
Yeah.
And we need that local expertise to accomplish the tasks that we want to achieve.
Absolutely.
Everything's a partnership. We, I think, from my perspective, like the BDF is our efforts here trying to be that hub for all these spokes out there. To we be the central location where we can gather a lot of troops and do work under, in the guise of blacktail deer. But again, it's a whole ecosystem restoration type effort. And so working with partners of the Forest Service up and down along the Cascade Range and the BLM down in the southwestern Oregon and such too, is that it's all going to be all partners type thing to move the needle forward and support carrying capacity for all wildlife on the landscapes.
And I said an incredible variety. When you look at the range of blacktail going from the oak savanna to Northern California and on the extreme end of that through kind of the drier forests of southern Oregon into the more increasingly wet forests as you move on up into Alaska, and the changing of tree species and all those kind of things. The habitat is so diverse and the needs are going to be so specific for those areas.
Absolutely.
Predators are different and the habitat's different and the vanishing water is different and whatever else, right?
Well, it will be very interesting. I look forward to going to that event tomorrow and learning more about what has happened so far and what we have planned for 2026. Because, clearly from this conversation and obviously before this, being that we all work there, it was needed, it was necessary, not only on a conservation or biologist level, but just the communities that you guys come in contact with daily were relieved, it sounds like, to have this foundation started. So I look forward to seeing what the next year brings and hopefully many years after. And before we close, I just want to take a listeners walking away with, I hope from this episode, you got, who BDF is, who the Blacktail Foundation is, and what it is we do, and some of the things that we are addressing. And it's similar. It's going to be habitat and all the nuances that go with populations. And I just thank you guys so much for your time and for your knowledge and sharing with us today. And thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.